And I'll start again by showing the session log that you have to do to begin with. So now we're not in point of sale anymore. Let me jump back here. So the CSM report seems to be in different places for different sites. So I'm just going to do up at CSM. You'll have to figure out where it is in your site and how to get there. Let me get back here. CSM. So controlled substance management report. And like I say, it's going to be, it's at different places and different sites. So just find where yours is. So you'll put in the date range that you want to look at, and then of course that's up to you. We're just going to do -90 in today. And then once again, like with the RCR, I would suggest taking all your defaults, because you can filter this stuff later if you want to look at specific things. This makes it easier to run the report. One thing you could do if you're a CMOP site and you really don't want to include the CMOP, you could say no there if you wanted. That won't affect anything. So once you get here, you're going to do your 0, semicolon 180, semicolon, bunch of 9s. Like I say, I suggest 6 or 7. 7 for large sites. You can do 7 all the time. It doesn't really matter. But then you're going to go up and you're going to start your session log. Make sure you know where you saved it. And then go ahead and hit enter here. I'm not going to because it'll show patient data. But you would run the report to the end. And then once it's finished running, you can go up and stop your session log. And then you'll have your CSM session log file created. And remember that you have to have your columns in the telnet set to be at least 180. You only have to do that one time, but if that's not done, the report won't run correctly. So make sure you've set that up, and that's in the instruction manual. All right, so you'll have your report. You're going to click on the Controlled Substance Management button, and you'll get the pop-up that kind of explains what the CSM is. Right here it says there are specific ones that you have to have if you're going to run the pivot tables and graphs, and so make sure you put those in. You can put them in any order you want, but you just have to have those included somewhere in your columns here. Now, I've already selected the columns that I want for this. You can select whatever columns you want in whatever order, and you know, this is all the data that's in the CSM report that you can choose from. There's a couple extras that I've added, which is daily MME, which is milligram morphine equivalents, or excuse me, morphine milligram equivalents, and that's the daily morphine milligram equivalents, and then the total morphine milligram equivalents. That's a tongue twister. And once again, I did mention this earlier, but it came from the CDC's conversion factors, are what I use to calculate those morphine equivalents, and that's pretty broadly used. And then there's a few I had to calculate manually because the CDC put that out, I think, in 2014, and there's been some buprenorphine that has come out since then that has different conversion factors that aren't listed on that conversion factor document. So you'll select your columns, and then this second option, would you like to display pivot graphs and tables that allow you to quickly analyze the data contained in the CSM report? I would suggest putting yes, but if all you need is just the raw data, then you could put this to no, and you won't have any of the reports and graphs and things like that. You'll just have just the raw data. And it runs the report quite a bit faster when you do that, but you don't have a lot of the extra data that you may want. And then this last option is the same as it is with the RCR, is do you want that text file that your session log file is what that's talking about, to be deleted automatically. If you yes, it'll delete it. Now, if you remember when I did the RCR, I said that, well, actually it didn't go through because I had to change that back. Never mind. Forgot about that. But it'll delete that file and it'll no longer be there. So I'm going to go ahead and, in this case, I'm going to put yes, and it will delete the file that I'm going to use, which is this one right here. So you can see it's there now. And hit save. Oh, I have to put chart number in here. So if you forget to put one of these, it's going to tell you, hey, you forgot the chart number. And fill dates. Oops. And let's put So now I'm going to go and select the CSM. It's on my desktop. CSM right here, the identified. So it's going to extract it, and then they'll get a pop-up here, and it's going to say, it kind of explains it, and it's talking about the total daily morphine equivalents. So there's been a big push, and I think a lot of you probably heard about it, about the naloxone we're dispensing because there's a lot of overdoses. Well, overdoses significantly go up as you get above 50 morphine equivalents, and even before that. And then when you get to 100 morphine equivalents per day, you're 3.6 times more likely to overdose than if you're receiving less than 100. And that's a big difference. And so that's why some states are starting to regulate and say, well, if someone's going to be on more than that, they need to have a pain consult, or they have to be a cancer patient to prescribe more than that. And there's different regulations going on. But this allows you to kind of look at your patient population, see where you're at your site. And so what this is asking is, what do you want for your cutoff filter to look at the daily morphine equivalents? Do you want to look at everyone that has 100 or more daily morphine equivalents, or do you want to look at everyone that has 60 or more? The lower you go here, the more patients it's going to show, and the longer it's going to take to process. Now, if you're at a small site, it's not going to really matter. But if you're at a large site and you put like 20 in here, saying that you want to see every patient that's on 20 morphine equivalents or more, it's going to take a long time to run your report. I'm just going to put 100 because that's, you know, kind of a nice cutoff, clean cutoff. For the naloxone, it's 60. You could put 60. I'm just going to leave it at 100 right now. And then this was an addition that came from our testers, the suggestions from the testers, as an upper limit value. So you have the cutoff at 100, so you can see everyone above 100 now. And then this is saying, do you want to have a secondary cutoff, or not cutoff, but secondary line that you want to see above? So say you want to see the ones that are everyone above 100, but then you want to have it highlight those that have, say, 240 or more, or 200 or more that are on really high doses. So I'll just put 200 in here. If you leave it at 0, as it says right here, if you leave it at 0, it's just going to not have that secondary limit. It's just going to have that first cutoff. So I'm going to put 200 to show you what that does. And then lastly, it's going to ask you, do you want to show just your opioids, or do you want to show the opioids plus the other controlled substances that those patients are on? And the default is no here, but I'm going to go ahead and say yes so I can show you that. So it's going to find those patients that are above that cutoff. It's going to put on some finishing touches, and then it's got to highlight those. And this is highlighting those based on the cutoffs that you made, that 100 and then the 200 I did in this case. So it's highlighting those. It's highlighting the benzodiazepines that patients are on, and it takes a little while. Like I say, the bigger the site, the longer this takes. But I put these bars in there so you can kind of see that it is working on it. It's not just sitting there doing nothing. So you'll get more pop-ups. I would suggest reading these, even though I'm going over this stuff with you. There may be some details in here that you missed when I was talking, or forgot, or whatever. So it's good just to read through these. And as I mentioned earlier, you can always tell them not to show up anymore by clicking here. Once you feel like you've got this, you know exactly what it says, and you don't need it anymore. I'm just going to click on OK, I've got it, so that'll mean this will pop up next time. There's a second one here. You can see there's a very important section, and this is the setup that you have to make sure that you do, that I explained in the initial setup section of this recording. But anyway, read through this, and you can, once again, tell it not to show up again if you want. This talks about how I calculate the morphine equivalents. Now, on this tab down here, the TDMME by patient, this tab right here alone took 1 year to program. Now, it wasn't all my time because I was doing it at home and not much at work, and so it took a while. But it probably took over, I'd say, somewhere between 100 and 150 hours just to program this one tab. So that's where a lot of the action is. And I'll show you that in a minute. And this pop-up is talking about how some of the things are calculated there. So it's talking about daily morphine equivalents are the number of tabs per day, which is the quantity divided by the day supply, times the number of milligrams or micrograms per tab times the conversion factor. And then for the total morphine milligram equivalents, you just do it by quantity times the milligram or microgram per tab and then times the conversion factor. And these conversion factors are the ones that are in that PDF from the CDC. So that kind of explains what those are. It talks about, this is the document that's referencing here that I included in the pod. It's named a little bit different because we had to shorten it for the pod, but that's the PDF that's included. And it just, it's saying that when new stuff is added to the market, I'm going to have to program those things in. They're not in there currently. So anyway, just be aware that new products may not calculate or could potentially calculate incorrectly. So if you have a brand new product that just barely went on the market, I would suggest just emailing me to say, hey, is this one included in the conversion calculations? And then I can look and make sure that it is or isn't. And if it's not, I can add it and send out a new update. Because I'm not going to know all the narcotics that are coming out all the time, depending on what they are. And you may at your site. And so just give me a heads up if there's a brand new one that you're needing and you want to make sure it's accurately calculated. All right, so this is the raw data. And once again, if on that main page, I'm going to go back. On this main page, when you're choosing your columns, you put a no right here that you don't want to see all the graphs and stuff. All you would get is this page right here. You wouldn't get any of these other tabs across the bottom. All you would have is the raw data here. And for some cases, that's all you want, like when you're doing your narcotic audits and things like that, just of your actual dispensing. You may only want this if you're printing it and putting it in a book or what have you for DEA requirements. So that's just the raw stuff. And once again, you've got the filters across the top. You've got the option to sort and to filter here. And that's why I say, if you just take all the defaults but you only wanted to look at, say, purple pharmacy, you can see there's a bunch of different divisions. But if you only wanted to look at purple, you can filter here, and then you'll just have your purple pharmacy. So you can filter when you're running the report, but it's easier just to hit enter and go through the whole thing and then filter here. Because then you'll have the data if you ever wanted to look at it. You wouldn't have to run another report. All right, so that's just your main data there, and you can filter down and sort as you want if you want to look at certain things. But most of your time is probably going to be spent on these tabs here. So the first one is the DMME by division. So that's daily morphine milligram equivalents by division. So what that is going to be your average daily morphine equivalents per script by division. So for instance, Blue Pharmacy here, their average opioid script is 34 morphine equivalents per day. Brown's is 24, Green's is 21. So when you have different divisions, you can use this to kind of get an idea, like, is there one division that's kind of prescribing higher doses overall to their patients? Is there a reason for that? Are they, a cancer treatment center? Are they pain treatment center? Or is it just a regular clinic and it's really high and you're wondering why? So this just allows you to quickly see that for your divisions. Now, if you want to drill down and see the data that created these, you can just double click on the number over here. So like say I wanted to look at Blue Pharmacy, so let me see what created that 34 average. You just go over here on the number 34 and you just double click. And it's going to give you all of the data that created that. So this is all Blue Pharmacy's opioid scripts. And you can kind of look at them, well, it's all their scripts, not just the opioids, but all of them. But the average is coming just from the morphine equivalents here, because you can see like Zolpidem, for instance, doesn't have a morphine equivalent. And so it's not calculated in the average. But anyway, this allows you to drill down and kind of look a little bit closer at things. And it creates a new sheet. You can see it creates a sheet 11 here. When you're done looking at this, if you don't need it anymore, you can just delete it. And you're back here. And you can do that for any of these just to drill down a little bit further. You can also use there's filters here. Like say you wanted to see about a certain prescriber. You could type in his name here, so we could just do, I want to look at number 117, prescriber 117. And then, okay, so he works at Blue Pharmacy, and his average script is 45 per day. Now, there's another tab here total daily morphine equivalents by patient and by prescriber that does this for you. But you could filter on this one if you want. You can filter by the day. You can filter by, if you just wanted to look at, let me just put back all the providers here. Oh, let's see. All, that's what I want. If you wanted to just look at a certain drug, so say I wanted to look at all your oxys, not that one. I could select all those, and then the numbers will change. So for all my oxy strips, that's what my morphine equivalents are by division. So I just give you some options of things you can filter and look at. You can also sort by division down here. Choose if you just want to look at a specific division, but it's already kind of delineated by that, so that's not very helpful. It's just part of the pivot table graph that it sticks it there. At the top of each pivot table, you're going to have an explanation of this table or this graph and what it means. I would suggest reading each of these so you understand what you're actually looking at. So I'm going to go on to daily morphine equivalents by prescriber. Once again, there's an explanation right here. So this is all your prescribers. There's a lot of prescribers from this report, and it gives the average daily morphine equivalent per prescriber. So you can kind of look through here and you can see, like, here's this outlier. Prescriber number 118. He's prescribing 94 on average per script, 94 morphine equivalents, whereas everyone else is, 60 or less. Why is he prescribing 94? So what you can do is you can go over here, you can find prescriber 118, which is right here, and you can double click on his number, and you're going to see all the scripts that he wrote. He only wrote 2 scripts, and one of them happened to be a fentanyl patch, which has a very high morphine equivalence, and so his average was 94 because he only had 1 script and it was quite high, and then 1 other script. So then you're like, oh, okay, well, that's not a big deal. He has 1 fentanyl patch patient. So it allows you to kind of give context to the data that you're looking at here. And once again, once you're done with that, you can just delete that extra tab it created. And you can do that for any of these. You can look through the prescribers, and if there's anyone else you wanted to look at, you just go over and find their number, double click on their data, and you're going to get all their scripts that they wrote. All right. So that's the average daily morphine equivalent per script by prescriber. Next tab, this is the one that I spent, like I say, over a year working on with a lot of banging my head against the wall. And this is where I had to have my brother help. He's a programmer by trade. And so I spent a couple days with him trying to figure out some things that I was stuck on. But we got through them, and so here it is. This is probably what you're going to use the most when you're looking at individual patients and trying to be more responsible with your medication prescriptions in the opioids, or for the opioids. So what this gives you at the top here is slightly different than the other ones because this is a table. I've got 3 different click boxes. When you click on them, it's going to give you some information about this tab. I would highly suggest you read all of them, as it describes the table and what the data means and how it's displayed. I'm going to go over it quickly, but you'll want to read through those. So on the left-hand side here, you're going to have your patient and the drug that they were taking. So on this tab, only the patients above 100 are shown, because that's what I chose when I was running the report. It asked me what my cutoff was, and I put 100. So if you put something like 60 or something else, then it's going to be everyone above 60. So in this case, it's everyone above 100. When you click on this blue one right here, you can see that it says this is displaying the morphine milligram equivalents for each patient who received greater than or equal to 100 daily morphine equivalents. And that's based on that number I put in. Now, if you put 60, it would say 60 here in this instruction. So if you can't remember what your cutoff was, and you've got this, you can click on the blue one, and you can remember, oh, okay, it was 60 that I used for my cutoff. Or 100 or whatever. In this case, it's 100. So only the patients on more than 100 morphine equivalents are shown in this. There's a lot more patients than are here, This is just the ones above that cutoff. And so it's going to highlight any section in their drug therapy that is above that 100. And it's by date. So you've got every single date of the report is going to be displayed here. Okay. Plus, at the end, there'll be extra days displayed, and I'll explain why. But it will start with the first day of the report and go to the end of the report or past the end of the report in most cases. Each of the black ones are fill dates. This is when they filled the medication. And then, like I say, the blue highlighted here, it's got like a little key here. So daily morphine equivalents greater than the threshold are in blue. Fill dates are in black. Daily morphine equivalents greater than the upper limit, which was that second number I put in, which was 200 in this case. But you can put in whatever you want. You can see that they're boxed in red. So it's above 200, it's boxed in red. That helps you find your high risk patients, but also show some of your other patients. And then your benzodiazepines are highlighted in green. When I scroll down here, you'll see that this patient has a benzodiazepine that is highlighted in green. And here's another patient. And that just helps you highlight those patients because there's been some information recently that it's been around for a long time, but been in focus recently about trying to avoid benzodiazepines and opioids at the same time. So this just allows you to quickly find those patients just a little bit easier. All right, so as you look at this, you're going to be able to look at your patients. You're going to have their chart numbers, you're going to have their name, and all the drugs that they're on. And you'll be able to see when they filled. So they filled on 10/1, and then they filled again on 10/29. You might ask, well, what day supply was this? You can just double click on the number there, and you'll see that it's a 28-day supply. In column F there. So you know that this is a 28-day supply. So the fact that they got it on 1/1 or 10/1 and got it again on 10/29, that makes sense. 28 days, they ran out, they needed more. Now, if you run into a situation where someone's getting it early, see if I can find one here. I don't know if this is early, but so here's one, and there's another field there. We've got 10/14 to 10/28. So this is probably a 14-day supply. It's a 15-day supply. So I'm going to delete that. And so, that's not really early. It's fine. But what the program does is if you're at a site where you're having problems with early fills and things like that, or even if you're not, it's going to still do this. And that's what this black button describes. But if you have, say you had a 15-day supply here and you filled it 1 day early, well, you still have 1 day's worth. So this second fill, let's assume it was 14 days, would actually last 15 days because you should have 1 extra day from the previous fill. And so instead of displaying just 14 days here at 240 morphine equivalents, it would show 15 days because that extra 1 should still be available to them, and they should have 15 days worth of medication. Now, if you run a long report and someone is getting consistently early fills, at the very end of the report, it's all going to kind of accumulate, and it's going to add extra days onto their last fill, saying that they got a 14-day supply, but over the last 6 months, they've got it early so many times that now they actually have a 28-day supply or a 30-day supply. And so it allows you to kind of see that happening. It also is pretty sophisticated in how it does its calculations. So if, for instance, they had 240 morphine equivalents on this script, and then when they filled this time, it dropped to, say, 90 morphine equivalents, and it was a day early, then it would take those 240 and say, well, at 90, those 240 are going to last 2.5 days, and it rounds down to 2. So instead of having 1 extra day, they actually have 2 extra days because their new dose is lower. I don't know if there's any examples of that in this data set or not. Let me see if I can find one. And I'm just looking for fill dates and then seeing if the morphine equivalent before and after changed. All right, so here we go. Here's an example. So this person here was getting oxycodone at 23 morphine equivalents, and they got what looks like a 4-day supply, but let's take a look. I'm just double clicking. Sure enough, it's a 4-day supply. Delete that. a 4-day supply, and then now it's 15 morphine equivalents. Was that a 3-day supply? No, it was a 30-day supply. So this 15 morphine equivalents, they got a 30-day supply, but then you can see that 4 days later, they got another fill at 8 morphine equivalents. Well, because they had a 30-day supply at 15 morphine equivalents, and now it went down to 8, those extra pills are going to last a lot more than 30 days because you're taking essentially half as much. And so you'll see that this 8 morphine equivalents, it's another 30-day supply. And why they got another 30-day supply, that's a question to be asked. You'll see that it lasts longer than 30 days because they only had 3 days of this fill, and then they got that fill. And so they had 27 days left of 15 morphine equivalents worth, but now they're only at 8 morphine equivalents. So you'll see they filled it on 10/23, and then 30 days, that's a lot more than 30 days, and the reason is because those 27 days left of the 15 morphine equivalents is now going to add probably, well, without calculating it, roughly 55 days extra on top of the 30 days that this fill is. I know it's a little confusing, but that's how it does it, to accurately show how much that patient should actually have on hand. So those red boxes with that upper limit helps you identify patients quickly, like, okay, 623, that is a lot of morphine this patient is getting. Are they a cancer patient? Why are they on that much? You know, the risk of overdose is huge at that kind of dose. So this is where you can take this tab, you can take it to your pain committees or potentially P&T or med staff, depending on what you have at your site. And you can talk about these patients. You can say, look, we've got, you know, this gal is on 623 morphine equivalents. Is there any way we can do some physical therapy or some other things so that she's not on so much med that she's at risk of overdose? You can see there's quite a few at pretty high doses here. So anyway, this table is designed to make it really easy to manage your patients and make sure they're not on doses of morphine or opioids that are going to be dangerous to them. And hopefully it's helpful in identify those patients and making it quick and easy to talk about them. Because you can bring this up in your, bring up the file in your committee meeting, and you can just start, at the top and start talking about your patients. Now, granted, this is at a large site, so it would take a while to go through these, so you might have to get creative on how you do that, but at least the data is there, and you can use it as you see fit. All right, moving on. And I guess actually before I move on this right-hand side, you'll see pivot table fields. For the most part, you're probably not going to need to touch these, but if you start moving these things around, it's going to change this pivot table. It'll give you extra data. But currently, things are set up so it looks clean and nice. If you start adding things in here, it's going to get a little hard to read, but it will give you more information. Like you could put your day supply in here so you can see the day supply next to each of the drugs. But like I say, it gets really messy. But you can do that maybe with some of these other ones. But for the most part, I think I've got all the tabs set up to where you shouldn't have to do much with these filters. But if you're familiar with pivot tables and you want to mess around with these, you can. It'll change your graphs and add or subtract information as you see fit. All right, I'm going to move on to total controlled substances by division. So this just allows you to see how many controlled substances are being prescribed by at each division. I was asked a question once when I was presenting this. Well, how do you know? So Purple Pharmacy has 3,500 scripts during this period compared to Red Pharmacy at 34. But how do I know what % of their total scripts that is? That's a good question, but the CSM report doesn't include all scripts. It only includes controlled substances, and so there's no way with the report itself to be able to calculate that. However, if you wanted to, you could go and you could run an RxDA or a pharmacy workload report. I like the RxDA personally. It runs really quickly. And you would just run it for the same time frame as this report, which I didn't look at, but let's just assume it was 30 days ago to today. And you could take your number here of scripts that you filled, that's your total number, and you could take your, of course, you know, these are two different sites. This is not my site that the CSM is for, so these numbers don't make sense, but you would take your total, or you take your controlled substance total and divide it by the total for that division, total scripts, and that'd give you a percent of controlled substances, and you could do that for each division and get an idea of you know, what percent of scripts are each pharmacy prescribing, so you can get kind of a more apples to apples type comparison. So that's the way you would do that, and I think that's a good thing to do, and it's a good thing to be able to see what percentage each site has, but that's not something that this can automatically do because the data is not in the report. And once again, you can click on these just like any other pivot table to get all the scripts for that division. Like red division, you'll see that they only have, what, 34 scripts, whereas the purple pharmacy has, well, I guess we already know that because it's right there, total. But yeah, anyway, you could just see what the specific scripts were and things like that. So that's what you can do in that tab. This one is total controlled substances by prescriber. So you can see which prescribers are prescribing, you know, a lot of controlled substances. And this is all controlled substances. This is not just opioids. Same with here. This is all controlled substances. But on this one where you're looking at total number of scripts, if you did want to just look at, you know, how much are we tramadol? How much are our prescribers prescribing a tramadol? Well, we went from a whole bunch of prescribers to just a few, so some of them aren't even prescribing tramadol at all. And the ones that are, this guy did 10 scripts, this guy 2, 3, 2. So you can kind of drill down using these filters once again. You can do it by division if you want. You can do multiple filters if you want. And then if you wanted to look at the individual scripts, once again, you just come over here and find their name and double click on the number. And lastly, well, it's not the last one, but I say lastly because the total morphine equivalents by division and total morphine equivalents by prescriber, I don't find that useful. They're very similar to the daily morphine equivalents, but they're the total for the whole script. And, you know, you can use them if you want, but for the most part, the daily morphine equivalents is what we're more interested in. So these look very similar to those first two tabs. So I'm not going to really go over them in detail. So the totals by drug just gives you total of each drug. Pretty simple, straightforward. And that's that. And once again, if you need to navigate across the bottom, you can use the little arrows here. If your version is different than the version I'm using, it may be on this side. But there'll be a way that you can kind of go back and forth. You'll see ellipsis here that says there's more data. But I don't think a lot of sites are going to use these total morphine equivalents. But in the testing, we decided to leave it in there in case someone wants it. It was already created, so we thought, well, it's there. We'll just leave it. All right, wrap this thing up.